We are live, the Fantasy Fanatics MMA podcast. Happy to have you all here today joining us. I am James Lynch. He is JHK. JHK, what's up this morning? And also shout out to our producer, Michael, for making this all happen. How's everyone doing?
Good, man. And yes, of course, man, Michael's in the back. You can't hear him, you can't see him, but he's doing all the work.
He's amazing, man. Can't say enough good things. I've worked in this industry for a while. He's one of the best. And congratulations on his win last week over Tyron Woodley. One of these days we'll get him on camera because he does look like Vicente Luque. Just a little inside joke there for the rest of you. But if you guys haven't watched the show before, basically we preview a notable upcoming fight. And on today's edition, we're going to be previewing the TJ Dillashaw Cory Sandhagen fight. We're going to go through all the implications, the stats, all that good stuff. But I want for you guys to join along with us. So get the Fantasy Fanatics MMA app, Fanatics MMA app, I should say, to follow along. We're going to be using that today with all the stats and everything else. So yeah, get that ASAP. Also, make sure you hit the like button on this video, hit the subscribe button. We do the show every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, 8 a.m. Pacific time. So hope you can join us here as well. Also, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the chat here. We'll get to them as soon as I can after we do this breakdown. So let's get to it. We were going to do, by the way, Darren Till and Marvin Vettori. That fight got booted. So we're doing this fight instead here. It looks like Kevin Holland's going to be replacing Marvin Vettori. Replacing Darren Till, but we figured we'd do this fight instead. But it's a good one, man. TJ Dillashaw, Cory Sandhagen. First, just your initial impressions, John, on the matchup. Was this a fight to make? And what do you think about these two former training partners now competing against each other coming up here on May 8th?
I'm very excited to see TJ Dillashaw back. Before he was suspended, before he was popped for PEDs, I was a huge fan of his style, and I was supporting him all the way, man, until that moment. Then he had to admit that he was using PEDs. But yeah, I think this fight is the fight to make, just because what had happened in the Sterling and Jan fight that kind of delayed everything for TJ Dillashaw. It's really seemed like that the UFC wanted him to slide in and fight for the title immediately, and I was on the side of, he needed to earn it, man, because he did come off the suspension, and he's been out for like 2.5 years almost. So I don't understand how you could be out for 2.5 years and then get an immediate title and coming off a suspension by USADA. But yeah, this fight, I think it all worked out for even Cory Sandhagen too. This is the big matchup that he needs. I mean, and I think it's a huge opportunity for him.
I'm with you there. I said this the second TJ Dillashaw was reinstated. It was that he should not get a title shot. I mean, if you get busted for PEDs, you should not be rewarded with the title shot. I know technically he didn't lose his bantamweight title, but I don't care. It's the rules, man. If you're cheating, you shouldn't be rewarded with the title shot. So good call in the UFC. I do wonder what would have happened, like I said, if had say Jan or Sterling decisively won. I do wonder if they were going to slide TJ in there. Thankfully, they didn't. I think this was the fight I said they should have made. The second Cory Sandhagen beat Frankie Edgar. It makes a lot of sense. Sandhagen, unfortunately, is in a weird spot himself, because while he has back-to-back impressive wins, probably the best two wins you're going to find in the UFC this year are Cory Sandhagen's wins. He still does have that quick loss to Aljamain Sterling last year. So, unless it was Jan, let's say Sterling won clean, I think it would have been a tough sell to give him that rematch right away, although I think the scenario works out quite well with him having to fight Dillashaw. 3 contenders, that makes more than enough sense in the matchup. So, Mike, if we want to bring up the TJ Dillashaw tail of the tape, if we can, or anything that we have on him, I don't know if we have that available. If we do, get it up there. If not, I can just sort of read some stats here myself. But Dillashaw has not fought since January 2019. It actually feels like he's been out longer because it was so early in the year, right? So, we're taking a look here at the stats, UFC stats, which is great here. Yeah, so it's been a bit since he's been in the cage. The Henry Cejudo fight was the last one he had. It's the first time Dillashaw had been knocked out in a fight since the John Dodson fight in December of 2011. So Dillashaw pretty durable for the most part. I think the big question here that we can't really answer, and we can speculate, but how long was TJ Dillashaw using steroids? I mean, he was busted for steroids. He got, obviously was using them, but how long has this been? So you do have to question now a lot of those wins, the Cody Garbrandt wins, the John Lineker wins, the Rafael Sunsao wins, all those wins you have to look at, in my opinion. So that's what makes this interesting, because I'll be honest, JHK, if Dillashaw didn't get busted for, let's say it wasn't a case where he was popped for steroids and he lost decisively and he was out for 2 years, I'd probably be picking TJ Dillashaw here. I think on paper, from what we've seen in the octagon, he's the better fighter. But if he was using, we might see a completely different fighter. And I'm not going to mention any other fighters, but John, we have seen certain fighters when they come back off a steroid suspension, they just don't look the same. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree that we don't know what to expect from TJ Dillashaw. Are we going to see did he find some new things? You know what I mean? That's another question too, heading into this, the next stage of his career is like, because have you seen him? Have you seen his pictures recently?
Yeah, yeah, he
And
looks
and I,
ripped.
and I just watched the interview with him and Brett Okamoto, and he was talking about he got up to 168 pounds solid muscle. How do you do that? Like I know he got some science behind it, but it's the smell test, man. That's iffy right there.
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna. I mean, I would assume he's not gonna risk doing anything dumb again because that would ban him for life. I mean, it's one thing to get, but and the thing is, he got busted for like a high level of things as well. It was EPO, I believe. So that takes a lot of it. Here's the other intangible. This is what we like to talk about heading into a fight like this. Dillashaw had a lot of injuries. One of the things that did come out after the Cejudo fight was he needed some serious work. I believe it was on his shoulder, and so in some ways, I mean, that could be a benefit to Dillashaw that he's healthier. I mean, not to use. I mean, maybe this isn't the greatest example, but it reminds me a bit like thinking of someone like say. Even someone like Jim Miller, there's a good example. He had Lyme disease, right? He didn't know he had Lyme disease. He got it fixed. We've seen Jim Miller look a lot differently since then. I know that's a disease as opposed to an injury, but you get what I'm saying. With certain fighters, if they have a nagging injury that they've been using for a while and it gets fixed, sometimes they look better. So we'll see if that plays a role. We don't have the answers to that, but it is an intangible heading into the fight. The other intangible as well is that these two used to train together. We've seen training partners fight again, against each other. Rashad Evans, John Jones, more recent example, Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns. How much do you think that's going to play into the fight of, I'm sure in the back of someone's head, we don't know who that is, someone got the better of them in that training, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to play a major factor in this fight. And you've spoken to TJ multiple times, you've asked him about, or not TJ, Cory, and you've asked him about the, training with TJ. And one thing that is interesting to me is that Cory has been wanting to fight TJ for a while. You know what I mean? And it kind of shows you that Cory does have some confidence, coming from those exchanges and training with TJ in the past. And, from what I heard, he was helping him for the Brow fight. He was helping him for the Cruz fight. And they were flying him in. Sean Madden was even with him. So Sean Madden gave, I did an interview with him like a couple months ago, and he was talking about, the intense, like sparring sessions that they would have, during those, during those times. So I think it's going to play a major factor. I think Cory knows something that we don't know, and then we're going to find that out when they fight.
Might as well, good time to bring up Cory Sandhagen in terms of any sort of stats we can bring up with him, because the one thing with Cory in this fight is that he's going to have a height and reach advantage. So TJ Dillashaw, for those who don't know, 35 years old, 5'6" with a 68-inch reach. Cory Sandhagen, 28 years old, so he's younger, 5'11", he's taller, and he's got a 70-inch reach as opposed to Dillashaw, who was a 68-inch reach. So 2-inch reach advantage there for Cory Sandhagen as well. The other thing we got to bring up, and I really, I've done a lot of interviews with Cory, and, appreciate the shout out there, John. But if you want to hear a really good interview with Cory Sandhagen, one that's better than mine, I'll fully admit it, was the interview he did with Joe Rogan. Joe talked to him about what changed after the Aljamain Sterling loss. And, Sandhagen kind of alluded to a bit of, just being a little too comfortable in there. And he said how he had to sort of change his mentality. And they work a lot in that camp on the mental side of the game. I know Elliot Marshall does a lot of visualization with a lot of the fighters there in the gym. And we've certainly seen that, because I think Sandhagen looks a lot different than we saw prior to him fighting Aljamain Sterling. We see a lot more urgency. We see him sort of going in for the kill. If you remember early on in his career, in his UFC career especially, I mean, he's taken guys like John Lineker to a split decision. He's taken a Sunsao to a decision as well. Now we're seeing him finish fights against higher level competition. Why is that? I think a lot of that is the change in mentality as well. So that's where things are going to get interesting in this fight, because I'll be honest, like, I don't even think we've seen the best Cory Sandhagen yet. He's still 29. I think there's a possibility of him potentially, being an even better version than we've seen before. We talked about the lack of activity with Dillashaw. So this is always something I like bringing up. So since Dillashaw's last fight, which was January 2019, Cory Sandhagen has fought. Let's even include that fight that Sandhagen had early, because he fought Mario Batista in January 19th, 2019. Dillashaw fought Cejudo on the same card, actually, which I didn't even realize that. That's interesting. So same card, they both fought together. Since then, Cory Sandhagen has fought 5 times. That's crazy. Like, think how much of a difference that is in terms of what Dillashaw. So Sandhagen's been in those 5 fights. We've seen not only Sandhagen become a different fighter, but he's been very active. I mean, to fight 5 times since the beginning of 2019 during a pandemic of all times is pretty impressive. So how much do you think the activity will play in a role in this as well, John?
The activity is key, man. Experience is key, and the loss that he sustained against Aljamain Sterling is key for him as in his development. Like you said, mentally he's different. you know, a lot of people point to like the wins against Moraes and Edgar. Moraes he's chinny, you know, he's getting a little bit older. He has a lot of fights. And then they'll look at Edgar and say, Edgar's 39 years old and he's declining. But you know what, though? I think it's a perfect storm for Cory Sandhagen, to be honest with you, coming off the Aljamain Sterling fight where he could gain confidence, you know, get into this flow state against guys that are veterans, guys that, you know, are big names in the division and build this momentum. And I think that building this momentum is key for Cory Sandhagen heading into this fight against TJ Dillashaw.
The other interesting thing, and I just did a quick scan of Dillashaw's past opponents, Sandhagen by far is the biggest opponent he's fought in terms of height and reach, which should be interesting because, you know, some fighters, they thrive on it. Maybe it's an easier target to hit. For others, they struggle. I mean, we've seen fights where a fighter, you know, sort of towers over the other one, you know, in different divisions. So we'll see if that plays a role as well. But yeah, I think it's interesting because, like I said, Dillashaw, there's just so many questions heading in here with, you know, the PED use, with the layoff, with the fact that he's 35, right? Like typically, unless it's heavyweight, usually fighters, when they get into their mid 30s, they tend to regress a bit. So we'll have to see how that sort of plays out as well. The other sort of intangible we got to throw in here is the camps, right? Dillashaw comes from a great camp. That is one thing. You know, he's getting to, for those who don't know, works with Juan Archuleta, the Bellator bantamweight champion, who I think is an outstanding fighter, UFC caliber. No questions asked about that. Raymond Daniels, an outstanding kickboxer, someone that we've seen, you know, compete at a high level for a while. We've seen him in Bellator. He's a very good fighter as well. A lot older, but still, that's a good guy to have in your camp. Cub Swanson, I know, cross trains over there. We saw what Cub's been doing lately in terms of his, you know, bounce back and his last performance against Daniel Pineda. And he's got that upcoming fight against Chikaze. And then, of course, Brian Ortega also cross trains there as well. That's a big asset to have because Ortega's got a great ground game. His stand-up has come along as well. And I'm sure he got to work with him with Ortega. Was supposed to fight Volkanovski a while back. I'm sure they've got to work together as well. I've tried to interview Dillashaw. I've reached out to his management. I don't have that ESPN clout, unfortunately, but hopefully I'll get something with him at some point. Dillashaw, that is. Sandhagen, no problem. I can get him. But yeah, we'll see how that sort of plays out as well. And then, you know, for Sandhagen as well, he's going to work with Justin Gaethje. They got Kamaru Usman over there now. Like, this is a really cool fight, even just from the camp perspective of who these guys are getting to train with. So I'm very interested in that as well. All right. I think it's probably time for us to get to our pick. John, which way are you leaning in this fight?
I'm going to have to go with Cory Sandhagen in this fight. You know, he's got the youth, he's got the size. And when you look at TJ Dillashaw's loss, the last loss before the Henry Cejudo fight, who did he lose to? Dominic Cruz. And Dominic Cruz is a little bit longer, a little bit taller, kind of a similar style, right? Cory's a little bit more advanced. He's like the new 2022 version of that. But man, I just look at Cory Sandhagen as, like I said earlier, the momentum is there. He's very confident. You know, he's a guy that's not going to tell you about it. He's going to go do it in the cage. And yeah, the confidence there, I see it in the cage. The striking, the ground. He has everything to beat TJ Dillashaw. And there's too many questions with TJ. There's the age, like you said, 35. He's coming off both his surgeries on his shoulders, right? How do we know how his shoulders are going to have, you know, hold up in an actual fight where he's going 120% in that cage? Will they pop out? You know what I mean? Because he said in previous interviews that his shoulders would pop out like in training camp. So we don't know if his shoulders are 100%. Yeah, there's too many questions for TJ Dillashaw heading into this fight. Even though I love TJ Dillashaw and his fighting style, I think Cory goes in there and has that performance, has that highlight reel performance against one of the biggest names in the division, in the history of the division, and he's going to get that title shot.
There's a couple other you know, things I wanted to mention before I give my pick, but you know, the Cejudo knockout loss, we do have to point out that I'm sure the weight cut played a role in him getting finished in that fight because of the fact that he cut a lot. I mean, you talked about him being 168 now. Like, imagine him trying to fight at flyweight now. Like, I don't even think that's possible. You'd have to, and he was obviously juicing to do that. So just think of how much harm he did to his body just going through that process to get down. That could also be something against him as well, just how much that took out of him, not only getting knocked out, but also making that really drastic cut as well. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind with the matchup as well. The other thing we got to mention is that Sandhagen, a bit of a slight favorite on a lot of the lines I'm seeing. Dillashaw, the underdog, coming in. So that is interesting. Maybe if you're Dillashaw believers, if you feel like he's going to come out and look like the old Dillashaw, it might be worth a stab there. But I just don't know how TJ Dillashaw is going to win this fight. Typically, if you look at his wins, you know, the Garbrandt wins were knockouts, right? Sandhagen never been knocked out in his career. He was submitted by Aljamain Sterling. I can't remember if that was a knockdown and then he got submitted, but either way, Sandhagen has shown that he's got a pretty good chin. He's taken some shots from John Lineker, who hits pretty hard, so I would think his chin's going to hold up in this fight. It's possible he could, outpoint him like he did against, say like a Renan Barão or, even when he fought John Lineker as well himself. That's another thing that we could look at that maybe could outstrike, Cory Sandhagen. But I don't think that's going to happen here because, like I said, Sandhagen is going to be the taller, bigger fighter here. So I think this fight ends one of two ways. I think Sandhagen either knocks out Dillashaw. Maybe it is a case of, that he's done too much harm to his body with the steroids, the lay off the age, all that, and he gets finished. And like we've seen with Sandhagen, he's knocking guys out that don't typically get knocked out. When Marlon Moraes got knocked out, Marlon Moraes had not been knocked out a ton prior to that. Frankie Edgar, we're talking about one of the most durable guys, in the UFC. Yes, he's taken a lot of damage, and yes, he was knocked out, I think, a couple fights before with Ortega and Korean Zombie. But Max Holloway took this guy to a decision recently. That was the only time he's ever been finished at bantamweight. Even Pedro Munoz, the guy who was knockout power himself, could not finish Frankie Edgar. So I put that flying knee knockout win for Sandhagen in very high regard. And who's to say he can't do it here? So my pick in this fight is going to be either Cory Sandhagen in a really tough, decision, but I think a decisive decision, not a fight where you're going to be like, ooh, who won that? Or I see him getting an early finish over TJ as well if he comes out guns a-blazing and does it quite well. And to be honest, if I had to guess, I'd say TJ probably did have the better of them in the training just at the time because they were training years ago. I don't think Sandhagen is the fighter we're seeing now. So I think it probably was possible that TJ had that, but that might be some false confidence as well with the fact that he was using maybe back then. And that's something as well where Cory sort of knows that. And he's like, look, I trained with this guy when he was, using, and now I'm getting, now I'm way better than I was before. Also, I have a clip on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/sports, where I asked Cory about this. I said, look, I don't want to get anyone in trouble here, but what's your take on the whole, if TJ was using, did you ever see him use? He said flat out, and he gave a pretty good answer here, and I'll give him credit. He basically said that he has no proof. He's never seen anything of TJ using, but he says that if you're using something that specific, it's probably not the first time you've used it. So take that answer for what it's worth, but I would not feel comfortable picking TJ Dillashaw here. I feel very comfortable picking Cory Sandhagen in this fight.
Was that before Icarus came out?
When did they train together? It must have been because it was during the Muscle Farm days. It must have been before. I feel like it was before. Yeah,
he was flying out to Team Alpha Male too. And another factor I think that could play a role in here too is the no crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Cory's been fighting in front of no crowds for a while, and TJ's, he's used to the crowd. He's used to the big pay-per-views. He's used to the big festivities and everything, but now it's going to be gone. There's no crowd. There's nothing there. That could be a factor for TJ. And I think that's about it, man. I think these coaches, they know each other so well. They all live in pretty much the same area, and they've worked with each other multiple times in the past. I think that makes it also interesting too, because they know each other so well, even the coaches.
One other thing I'll mention, and we've already given our picks here, and we'll get to the chat here, and then we got a couple questions, and keep the questions coming, by the way. We want to, it would be great if you guys could focus on this fight and maybe the bantamweight division, but if you have other questions, there's a lot going on in the world right now with MMA, especially some of the fight announcements that happened last night. We can dig into that, but what about Duane Ludwig here? I do wonder about this because I know Duane, I believe he's still based in Colorado. I'm sure he has ties to that gym at Elevation Fight Team as well, just with, Colorado's a very, and you know this, John, they're all very, a lot of them kind of cross-train together. They all work together. There's a lot of respect there. Like I know Factory X guys that I'll talk to them and they'll be like, yeah, I'm rooting for Cory Sandhagen, or I'm rooting for guys from other gyms. There's a camaraderie there. I do wonder where Duane Ludwig feels on all this because I'm sure Duane worked with Cory at some point. How's that going to go? And the other thing I saw a bit of chatter on social media, I don't know if you saw this, but there was some rumblings about, TJ Dillashaw having some spies in Sandhagen's camp, like people that were recording. I read some thread on this. I don't know if that's true. I'll ask Cory about that the next time I speak to him, but I did read a thread about that I guess some new students were coming into the gym and they started filming and people were like, what the heck? And then they realized they had ties to Dillashaw. So we'll see. Look, I think, by the way, TJ is handling this perfectly. I like the fact that he went after Aljo after the whole DQ thing, because here's the thing with TJ Dillashaw. He's playing the villain roll up, and he should, because no matter what, for the rest of his life, people are going to call him a cheater, and that's not going to go away. You're never going to be this baby face. You're never going to win people over. It's very rare that you get busted for steroids and people like you. Brian Ortega is maybe the exception to the rule. I think people even forget that Ortega got busted for PEDs, right? But that's just because he's such a likable guy and whatever. But with Dillashaw, it's going to stay forever. They had the whole snake thing without alpha male. Like, he's playing this villain thing up as well. So I think he's playing this perfectly as well. And if that is true about the people in the camp, even if that's something he just made up, it's adding more to the fight, I think. And it's just such a good fight. I love this matchup. I think it's really awesome there.
There's also rumors going around that when TJ brought in Cory, Cory got the best of TJ over at Team Alpha Male. There's rumors going around like that too. I don't know if it's like 100% true or not, but I've heard those rumors going around.
Okay, because see, I just assumed that because Dillashaw was competing at a high level back then, and Cory was sort of still, sort of working his way up, that Dillashaw might have been the better guy. But I wouldn't be surprised either. Cory, I mean, there's certain guys in the gym that just sometimes you don't see the best in the cage, and maybe Cory was good back then, but maybe he wasn't showing it in the cage. We don't know, right? So that's interesting as well. Let's get to our first question again. Really appreciate you guys watching. Make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We do the show every week. That's an easy way to support the show without having to break your bank, so to speak. We can get to, maybe we're not going to read that username, but we can put the question there. It says, would a dominant win from TJ or Sandhagen be enough to leapfrog Jan in the fight for the belt? No, I don't think so. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. And I'll get your thoughts on this in a second. If Dillashaw wins, that might complicate things, but Jan, they got to do that rematch just with everything that happened there, with the way it unfolded. That would be a really bad look on not only Aljamain Sterling, but also the UFC as well if they decided to go that route. I get it's a bigger fight than if Jan had competed. But yeah, I think the rematch has to happen next. But don't be surprised. I mean, we've seen some crazy stuff happen when it comes to title shots and matchups and all that. So I wouldn't put it past the UFC to pull a fast one here. By the way, I don't usually like to announce interviews before I do them, but I am going to be speaking to Aljamain Sterling later today. Keep your eye out for that on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/LynchOnSports under the UFC interviews playlist. Curious to get his thoughts on that exact scenario. I want to ask him. I mean, because he was pretty. I think I even mentioned that to Sterling before he fought Jan the first time. Was like, what do you think of Jan saying he'd be open to fighting Dillashaw to fight the winner, even though Dillashaw coming off the suspension? And Jan was like, yeah, I'll take it. It's a money fight. So, anyways, your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, that's an iffy one. You know what I mean? I do believe that logically you do have to have that rematch just because how everything played out. But Sterling seems like he doesn't want to sign the contract to do the rematch. So I guess they're gonna wait until this fight and then to figure out like who's gonna be next. Because if TJ wins this fight, they're gonna probably give TJ the title shot. If Cory doesn't, most likely they're gonna probably end up doing the rematch with Peter Yan. This is some rumblings I've heard too. You know what I mean? Like after that fight, like they weren't committed to a rematch right away. So we'll see what happens.
We got a quick thing from our producer here. I'm just going to read this here. Yeah, so we actually have an article here. I'm going to read this quote. It's from TJ Dillashaw, and this is why Mike's the best, man. Love this guy, man. Shout out to Mike. He's good. The quote is, "We got kids like one of my buddies, Cory Sandhagen, that I train with now at Muscle Farm in Colorado." This is an old quote. When is the article from? I'm going to check the date on here. The article.
Did you put it up on the screen, Mike?
No, he's got it in the chat here. I'm just going to read it right now. So yeah, bear with me. I'll do my best TJ Dillashaw impression. We got kids like one of my buddies, Cory Sandhagen, that I train. No, I'm not going to do that. That I train with now at Muscle Farm in Colorado. He'll get the better of me, and he's not been in the UFC yet, but he'll be a great fighter. And damn, if he can't beat this guy, what's going on? So this is an earlier quote when they trained together at Muscle Farm of TJ Dillashaw, already acknowledging the greatness of Cory Sandhagen. So that's interesting. So forget what I said earlier. I mean, obviously TJ knows that this guy is very good. So I mean, that was from years ago at Muscle Farm. Muscle Farm doesn't even exist anymore. So what do you think of that, John? I mean, it's something you kind of alluded to here in the podcast today.
Well, TJ's been, he's been praising Dillashaw or praising Cory for a while, I believe. Like that's what he said in the interview with Brett Okamoto. Like, I've trained with him extensively. I've been praising him. I knew that he was going to become somebody. Maybe he didn't know at that time, but I knew that he's a great fighter. And that's just him showing you, you know what I mean? Like he's a great fighter. Does that mean that, Cory was dominating TJ? I don't think so. I think TJ was just giving him a compliment and trying to build, pump him up a little bit.
This is a great question here from Ben Gordon, not the basketball player, but he says, who wins in a straight kickboxing match, TJ or Sandhagen?
That's a tough question.
Again, the problem is we don't know if we're going to see the TJ of old. We don't. We literally can't answer that. I have no idea. Maybe we do. If we do, then maybe it's close. Maybe TJ could do it. But I would think with the height and reach, Cory's got the advantage there, even in a kickboxing match.
Let's say since we're a fantasy, Fanatics fantasy MMA app, let's play some fantasy. Like let's say we get the TJ that we got, that
of
fought
old. The one that let's say the one that fought Garbrandt, right?
Garbrandt, yeah. Let's say we got TJ that fought Garbrandt, which was probably one of the best versions of any fighter we've ever seen in our lifetime, right? Mm-hmm. And if he goes in there as that TJ against Cory, then the pick is different for me, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
the pick is completely different. You know what I mean? I would pick TJ because I feel like that guy was hitting all cylinders, you know what I mean? And Sandhagen is still kind of like raising up right now, you know, up the ranks a little bit, even though he's at the top of the division. So yeah, in a straight kickboxing match, if we got the old TJ, I would still take TJ. Or yeah, TJ, I would take TJ.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I don't know where I'd lean on that one, because the thing, there's still, believe it or not, even after those 2 wins, there's still some question marks on Sandhagen. As I've just gone on this whole thing talking about how great Sandhagen is, he's been finishing his fights a bit early too. So it's like, we don't know, like, let's say it goes later, like, how's Cory going to handle that? You know, Dillashaw has that championship experience. It's something we haven't talked about, is like, can Sandhagen go like 5 rounds if it needs to go in that level? We know Dillashaw can go that far. You know, the early fights with Barao, he was, you know, firing on all cylinders, even in like the 4th round. So that's a question mark as well. I mean, this could be a fight too, where, because here's the thing, if Sandhagen loses this, let's say he gets knocked out or something, people are going to say, oh, well, those 2 fights were lucky. Maybe they were. I don't know, but I'm banking not. I mean, we've had 2 fights now where he's finished the guy decisively. I would think that that's an improvement. Yeah, I think I would still take Cory in, to answer your question on the kickboxing match, but we'll see. We got the boss man, James, in the chat, says, what has to happen for the general public to forgive Dillashaw? Does he need forgiveness? I think the only way he could do it is if he like did some crazy like PR tour or something, where he went to like hospitals, or like, like, I don't know. Like, I think it's almost nearly impossible. MMA fans do not forget. They do not forgive. Like, I'm trying to think of someone who's been popped for steroid, like even Jones, like he still has a ton of fans, man. And this guy's been popped a couple times, say what you want about the USADA issues or whatever, but like, he's still like, people still love that guy a lot. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there is one particular answer, but I'd say if I'm a betting man, I'd say the fans, the majority of fans will still not like TJ.
I don't think TJ cares.
Yeah,
that's the feeling I get too. Is like, TJ doesn't care. If you hate him, that's better for him, because like you said, he's embracing the snake role. So might as well get as many haters as possible. The haters are going to want him to lose, so they're going to watch him fight so they could watch him lose. That's what they want, and that's what TJ wants. I don't think he needs to go and get forgiveness. Well, he does need to do it, but I don't think he cares about it anymore, because if he did, I think he would have done it a long time ago. Why would he start now?
Yeah, he was off the whole time. Then he could have done this tour being like, hey, I'm going to go, talk to kids at their school about why you shouldn't take steroids. He wasn't doing any of that. So you're right. I think it's probably more of a case that he doesn't care. And I don't think the fans will ever be on his side, so to speak. We got a comment from Max here. He says, how do you make a case of Dillashaw winning this? I can't see him how he doesn't get smoked. Yeah, I'm not, I mean, I think if he looks like the old Dillashaw, like if like I said, the one sort of way you could look at this fight is maybe the time off has benefited Dillashaw. Maybe he's going to look even better than he was. Let's say for argument's sake, devil's advocate's sake, that TJ Dillashaw was only using for that one fight. Okay. And let's say the Garbrandt fights he wasn't using and he looked outstanding. Okay. We'll assume that. We'll also assume that the time off has allowed him to heal his injuries and he's looked a lot better. That's how he could win, is that he could outstrike Cory Sandhagen, because in my opinion, he was one of the best strikers, not just in the bantamweight division, but maybe in the UFC in terms of what he was able to do without pointing his opponents. By the way, I also thought he beat Dominic Cruz when he fought him and lost that fight. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But yeah, I mean, that's I think the only way. But I mean, if we're looking at the stats, we're looking at history of MMA. A guy who's 35, off 2 years, off injuries, and was using steroids, it's probably not going to end well for him. That's my take. So, Max, I understand what you're saying, and I completely agree, but I think it could also be one of those cases where we'll have to see what happens. So,
another thing that I didn't get too far deep into earlier was his weight gain. Like he said he's 168 pounds, or he got up to 168 pounds, a solid muscle. And also for him, a guy that relies on a lot of movement, is that good for him to be that big and just be all muscle? I don't know. Like, would it play a factor in this fight coming up? It could, you know what I mean? If he's not moving as fluid as he did before. And are we going to see the same style, TJ? Is he going to change it up, or is he going to be more wrestling based because he added some pounds? You know what I mean? Like, that's just, some things that running through my mind with this fight, man. That's what makes this fight so interesting.
I agree. By the way, I know you guys are probably watching this. I don't know how it is on your guys' end, but it's a little choppy on my end. My apologies for that. I've closed everything on my computer, so hopefully there won't be a bit of a chop. And I know the questions aren't appearing, but we'll do our best as we're working through this. I know my man Mike is working the magic behind the scenes, so I really appreciate that. But I am seeing it. I don't know how it's looking on your end. Is it looking a little choppy on your end?
No, it's perfect.
Okay, mine's choppy. I don't know why. Maybe it's my computer. My bad. Anyways, let's get to the next question here from Lucas. He says, should Sean O'Malley be given a top 10 or top 5 guy now? If so, who? I think top 5, no. Top 10, yes. But you got to be careful who that top 10 is. For example, I don't think he should fight Dominic Cruz. I think he loses that fight. I think O'Malley gave an A+ performance, but it was against an unranked fighter. It was against a guy that, let's be honest here, might get cut from the UFC after losing that fight. The Thomas Almeida we saw on Saturday is not the Thomas Almeida that fought, was on that winning streak or had fought Cody Garbrandt. That Thomas Almeida, I don't think exists anymore. I think it's, injuries and a variety of other factors have made him slow down a lot. So while it was an A+ performance, it's against a guy who's not ranked. So you're fighting a Dominic Cruz who, just beat Casey Kenny, who's, was on the come up, who had a couple dominant wins leading into that fight. Cruz is then 2 fights removed from losing to Henry Cejudo, who, many are considering one of the greatest bantamweights of all time, which, that's a debate in itself. But yeah, I think you got to be careful. To me, there's 2 fights you do with Sean O'Malley, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, John. The first fight is Rafael Sunsao. Now, Rafael Sunsao is, I think, regressed. We saw him knocked out in his last fight against Cody Garbrandt. Sunsao's not really like a knockout guy. I know he has the one, I think, finish over Matthew Lopez ages ago. Matthew Lopez is now retired. I mean, it's not this, not exactly a quality win, so to speak. And then, Sunsao's just, like I said, he's older. He's a bit slower. O'Malley could take advantage of that and probably win. And here's the thing with the Sunsao. I think he's ranked number 9 or something like that. I'll have a quick look at the rankings. But, I mean, that would make sense because he's fighting a ranked guy that I think he could win. Here's the thing with Sean O'Malley is the business with Sean O'Malley is only good if he's winning fights, right? So Sunsao I see here is ranked number 10. I think that definitely makes some sense here. Cruz is ranked number 9th. Why don't you give him the number 10 guy if that's the route you're going to go? I know some people mentioned Kyler Phillips. I think Phillips they train together, so I don't think that works. You've got Stamen and Merab fighting. I don't even like that fight either because I think Merab wins that, and I think Merab would probably beat Sean O'Malley. So again, you avoid that as well. Here's the one wild card, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on it as well. Marlon Moraes. I think that could be interesting because there's some school of thought out there that Marlon has regressed. Ever since he's gone to ATT, he hasn't won a fight. And granted, I thought I guess technically he won the Aldo fight, but I mean, even then, I think some people felt like Aldo defeated him, but he's taken a lot of damage the last couple of fights. O'Malley might be getting him at a good time. The reason you would do that fight is if you want to give O'Malley a fast track to a title shot, that's the way to do it. Is you give him Moraes. Is he ready? I don't know, but that's a bit of a risk there, but at least you get a really good indication if you beat a Marlon Moraes, where he belongs in the division. So what do you think of those 2 options? And also, what is your pick for Sean O'Malley's next opponent?
I like the Marlon Moraes option because Marlon Moraes is on a skid and he's a name, you know what I mean? And, he's fought some of the best in the division. It'd be a good test for Sean O'Malley. Also, I look at Jimmy Rivera too as someone that he could fight. He's ranked there number 11. I feel like his style is something that could give, problems to Sean O'Malley, but it's still not like an unwinnable fight for Sean O'Malley, right? At the same time, a Sunsao, I think that's the best choice though out of those. He's sitting at that number 10 spot, you know what I mean? And I feel like you don't want to push him all the way to Marlon Moraes. He's number 6. You got an unranked guy fighting a number 6 guy. I don't know. I don't really like that too much, but Hamza probably was going to be able to do that earlier anyways. But anyways, I like the Sunsao matchup. I feel like, it's it sucks to say that fighters regress and say that they're on decline, but it seems like a lot of the guys in that bantamweight division are on the decline if you think about it, and it's a perfect
it's changing of the guard. You're 100% right about
perfect time for guys like Sean O'Malley to fight these guys while they're kind of like slipping down the ranks and they're going to be eventually out of the top 15. So O'Malley should take this opportunity and call out either one of those guys, Moraes or Sunsao.
Another name we got to mention in this mix, and we'll get to the next question in a second here, is Chito Vera. And obviously Chito, there was a bit of controversy in that win he had over O'Malley. Was O'Malley injured? Was it Chito that gave the injury? Whatever. Notice O'Malley didn't mention him after the fight. And I think that's by design here. I think, and I agree in some ways, I think he's ahead of Chito at this point. Even though Chito just lost to Jose Aldo, who I think is still a top bantamweight in that division, O'Malley's always got that clout for being O'Malley, right? So I think that win, even though maybe not as good of an opponent as some of the guys that Chito has beat, it's got more clout. So that's why he hasn't mentioned him. And why would you fight Marlon at this point? It's not a money fight. It's not a big name. He's ranked number 15. What does that even do for O'Malley? I think at this point, O'Malley is going to get a ranked opponent regardless. Why are you fighting a guy that you could maybe lose to again at 15 as opposed to setting your sights a bit higher? So that's something I wanted to bring up as well, because I know people will be like, what about Chito Vera? I'd love to see the rematch, but I just think for O'Malley, it's not good business, right?
It's not, and a win over O'Malley does a lot for you. Look what it did for Chito Vera. He went from O'Malley to Jose Aldo, one of the greatest featherweights of all time. It's just, yeah, so O'Malley needs to be very selective of who he picks next, and I feel like the UFC is going to do a good job in getting him a good fight, and he has great management too.
Big Zomega in the chat says, what are your thoughts on the 5-round co-main event, referring to the Nate Diaz and Leon Edwards? First off, I did a video on this last night. This completely came out of left field, and I am so shocked at the fact that I'm not even shocked about the 5-round co-main event. Whatever, the UFC bends the rules all the time and stuff like that. I'm more shocked that Nate decided to fight Leon. I mean, I know some people have been arguing with me, and they're like, well, if he wins, then he gets a title shot. But it's like I don't know. I don't think Diaz, he's never really struck me as a guy that wants to fight for a belt. I think he's about the money. So that's, if that's the case, fighting Leon Edwards is not exactly a good business move in my opinion, because I don't think he beats Leon Edwards. And on top of that, like you're coming back for Leon Edwards. Like I could see if he came back for Masvidal, and I know Masvidal's fighting Usman, or I could see if he came back for Conor. I could see he came back for even like a Cowboy Cerrone would make more sense. And I know Cowboy's fighting Diego, but you get what I'm saying? Like the Leon Edwards thing is very weird to me, because it's like, I don't think he wins. And I don't know if he's getting the type. I'm assuming he is getting the pay because it's a co-main event and it's 5 rounds and he's getting paid well. But I just don't think it's the type of fight that is a typical Diaz fight. Like I was looking down his resume over the last couple of fights. Like Leon by far is the lowest name on there that he's fought in a long time. So that's where I'm a bit confused by that. For Leon, I completely understand it. It's a winnable fight. It's almost as much clout as like a Hamzat Chimaev fight, in the sense that like Diaz is still a huge name. He's got big fans. There's fans out there, John, that feel like Nate Diaz is going to, Nate Diaz will knock out Leon in the first round, even though Leon's like never been knocked out, but like that doesn't matter. Fans don't care about that. It's the Diaz brothers, man. They can do anything. So there's that as well. But yeah, so my thoughts on it are, I see this as more of a win-win for Leon. For Nate Diaz, not so sure, but maybe he just wants to fight. I'm not sure. What was your initial reaction? And also it being a 5-round co-main event, which hopefully that's the theme of a lot of cards going forward.
This is my ancient aliens theory of this, why this fight was put together. I feel like Nate Diaz is on a short leash with the UFC. He has a big contract, right? So, to earn the money, you got to fight. And I feel like he's turned down so many fights with the UFC that they're getting to the point where they're like, it's not even worth dealing with with Nate Diaz anymore. It's not, and he's not going to go anywhere else and get paid the amount of money that UFC is going to give him, right? So it almost I feel like he got painted into a corner, and then Leon Edwards was the guy that they pushed in there and said, "Hey, we're going to give you this guy. You need to fight him, or we're going to release you." I think that could be a possibility. I'm picking straws, but I'm just saying, and that's why we got this matchup. This 5-round thing, I don't understand it. If they're getting paid more to fight 5 rounds, then all good, man. I don't care.
I would think they have to be. I was talking to someone about this in the chat. Like they would have to get paid more if you're doing 5 as opposed to 3. In fact, I feel like I've heard fighters say that, especially when you have a situation where, let's say, you're doing a main event, because this is typically where a main event would be, is 5 rounds. I know that if they've, let's say they've switched up to main event or something and it's 5 rounds, that I believe they do get paid more. I got to double check that, but I'm almost positive that's the case. Yeah, and I'm guessing I'm guessing that's a Diaz thing too, because he must feel like his cardio could go for a day. I don't know. Maybe that's it, because he does triathlons and stuff. So maybe that's why that is one fight we will preview on here. Maybe even next week we'll do that, because it's coming up pretty quickly. Actually, it's not coming up quickly. It's coming up in a few months. But you get what I'm saying. It's it's a fight that we'll definitely talk about on here and dig in a little bit deeper. But that's my initial thoughts on it. Is I think Leon wins the fight, and I think there's a lot of upside there for Leon. I'm hoping to talk to Leon here soon. Just spoke to him. I was trying to get an interview with him, but Joe Rogan took him instead. So we'll be getting Leon Edwards here pretty soon on my end. Let's see what we got here as far as other questions. We got Big Zomega saying, I think Cory's length will be an issue for TJ. Yeah, we sort of talked about that, and I tend to agree with that. Not much to say there. Big Zomega says, I thought somebody like Kyler Phillips would be a great matchup until I realized they train together. Yeah, a lot of people, you got to look at the camps. You got to look at, here's an easy thing to do as well. And I mean, it's, sometimes we're very reactionary when fights happen. Go take a look at the Instagram. I'm pretty sure there's photos of O'Malley and Phillips together. So that's an easy one to kind of figure out there. Here's a good one we can get into. The boss man, James. What does Arnold Allen have to do to get some buzz? Well, he'll get some buzz next week. He's the co-main event against Sodiq Yusuff, which love the matchmaking there. 2 up-and-comers. I'll be previewing that next week on my channel, and I know you will be as well, John. But what he has to do to get some buzz, he has to fight more often. That's been his biggest enemy, is activity. I'm going to take a quick look at his resume. I probably too soon to bring it up here on the screen with you, Michael, but I'll let me just have a quick look here. So Allen is 16-1, great record. two things I should say have actually halted him a little bit. So he made his UFC debut back in 2015. He has fought 6 times since 2015. So you're almost averaging like a fight a year. That's not enough. On top of that, what's his biggest win? Probably Americani, and that was back in 2017. Beat Mads Burnell, who's in Bellator. Rinaldi's not in the UFC. Melendez not in the UFC. Nick Lentz not in the UFC. He's retired. I know he had some fights pulled out. He had the Emmett fight that was supposed to happen. Emmett got injured. He was supposed to fight Jeremy Stevens. There was a shoulder injury there. It's activity. It's no different than Zabit. It's like the same thing. Like, people are like, Zabit, how come Zabit doesn't fight for title? It doesn't fight enough. It's as simple as that. What are your thoughts on that? There we go. Mike's the man. We've got to shout out to Mike there.
Yeah, you're right. It's inactivity. It's unfortunate circumstances for him because he did have some big fights with Josh Emmett and Jeremy Stevens that didn't, fall through. And now he's taking on a dangerous guy, man. Massive power in his hands. A guy that could go in there and probably knock him out in the first round. So, man, this is the biggest fight of his career right now because if he doesn't get past this guy, he'll drop probably out of the rankings. Because he's sitting at number 10 right now. And like you said, his biggest win was who? Amir Khani?
Yeah,
and where is Amir
and that was
Khani?
A split. That was back in 2000 and March of 2017. That's his biggest win. The other thing, and I hate to point it out here, but a lot of his wins are decisions. I mean, that's not going to get a lot of people's attention, at least with Sadiq Youssef. I mean, I know his last fight went to decision, but he got the spectacular highlight reel finish over Gabriel Benitez. He had the win over Mokhtarian back in his debut. I mean, that's the type of stuff that's going to get people's attention as well. So that's, I think, another reason why Arnold Allen has not broken into that conversation of being either a contender or past sort of that gatekeeper spot. That's why they put this fight together. They want to figure out who the better prospect is. And we see this time and time again where they're trying to figure out who's going to break from, being that perennial sort of up and comer to being a contender. That fight is going to answer that question. I cannot wait for that fight. I think that's going to be great because Sadiq Youssef, he is a bad man, as John mentioned. I'm very excited for that fight coming up here.
Yeah, Allen needs to go in there, either knock him out or submit him. He has to finish Youssef, and then he'll get a big fight after that. I feel like he could get someone like Calvin Kattar or a Korean Zombie in his next fight if he does go out there and show out against Youssef. Because in a way, it almost seems like this could be a showcase for Youssef to build his name off of Allen. Because Allen hasn't lost in the UFC. I don't believe.
No, he hasn't. No, you're 100% right there. Which is interesting. By the way, we might as well jump to this question. I will get to the other questions after this, but Radical Rosh, we can get to his question at the very bottom there. He says Nick Lentz is a very good win. I don't agree with that. Lentz, unfortunately, he's regressed a bit. He also suffered an eye injury in that fight as well. So that kind of played a role, I think, in the win on top of that. If you remember, Lentz was seeing double vision for months after that. If you haven't had the chance, I have an interview I did from MMA News a couple months back before his last fight against Avaliev, where he talked about how he almost had to retire then because of the eye injury. So that played a role as well. But I don't think it's that good of a win, just in the sense that Lentz, he's 36. He's, yes, he has a lot of fights. Yes, he's fought a lot of good fighters, but I think, if you're looking at the grand scheme of the featherweight division, I don't think it's that great of a win. Like, in fact, I think Andre Fili for Sodiq Youssef is a better win than Nick Lentz, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Nick Lentz, going back to that interview, incredible interview that you did with Nick Lentz. He opened up so much, man. It just shows you what fighters go through, and he went through a lot. And after that last fight, he lost, he retired. Now he's coaching at Sanford MMA, man. He's like taking this huge coaching role. So, shout out to Nick Lentz, man, for being so open in the interviews. For me, a guy that interviews fighters, it's always good to see that happen.
Yeah, it makes our jobs a lot easier as well, too. We'll get to Big Zomba. We'll say, what about Song Yadong training for Sean O'Malley? Did he say that? Has he posted something about that? I mean, it's not really up to him. He's coming off a loss to Kyler Phillips. He doesn't really have much leverage right now. Plus, I don't think Song is in the rankings right now. He's not. So that fight's not going to happen. But good thinking. I mean, it'd be an interesting.
I would like to see that fight. That would be a good fight, to be honest with you.
It would, but I mean, you're coming off a loss. You're fighting O'Malley off a win. It's probably not going to happen. Especially with if Song was ranked, you could make that case. But with him not being ranked, I don't think it happens next. So there you go. Great question here. Big Zamega. Who is your current favorite up and coming Canadian prospect? Well, I'll give a UFC one, and I'll give a regional scene one. UFC one, I don't care what people say. I still think TJ Laramie still has the most upside out of any Canadian prospect. It's, can he get it together? I mean, he had a terrible UFC debut. I mean, there's no other way to put it, but I do want to remind people that a similar debut happened to another exciting Canadian prospect in Hakeem Dawodu. Remember, Danny Henry submitted him in like a minute. Same thing happened to TJ Laramie. I think Laramie's got a tough test against Damon Jackson. Not going to lie about that. That's kind of a tough fight to come back and fight, but I still think with his age, with how young he is, with the fighters I've talked to, with the fights I've watched TJ have, I still think he's a very good prospect. And I think if he can get everything right with his training camp and his mind and everything else, I think he's going to be a force to be reckoned with because he's good everywhere. He's got good ground game, good stand-up. TJ Laramie would be my choice in the UFC. And then in the regional scene, I mean, it's a toss-up. Anthony Romero's really good. You've got Jasmine Jazavidius, who's really great as a women's flyweight fighter. I'll go there in Jeffrey, though. I think he got a raw deal on Contender Series. Why on earth Brendan Allen had to go on Contender Series is beyond me. He was the LFA champ, and then he had to go and fight on Contender Series against Aaron Jeffrey, who just did not have the experience. So Aaron Jeffrey would still be my answer. He just picked up the CFFC middleweight title over Colin Huckbody, who was initially signed to the UFC, so that's a good win. I know he didn't get a finish. Maybe that doesn't get him in the UFC because of him not finishing that fight, but Huckbody's pretty tough. But you even look outside of that, his only loss is Aaron Jeffrey to UFC fighter Sean Brady, who last time I checked is pretty damn good, and Brendan Allen, who last time I checked is pretty damn good. So I'll go Jeffrey on the regional scene and TJ Laramie in the UFC. Is there anyone you're thinking of? I mean, I have a better sense, obviously, living here, but
well, yeah, I don't really know too much about the regional scene, but in the UFC, I still believe that there's a high upside to Charles Air Jourdain. I feel like he has it. Maybe he needs to change camps. You know what I mean? Maybe he needs to go to one of these super camps and kind of get a taste of what's going on over there in stateside or something like that. But I feel like he has it, man. He's shown sparks of excellence in there against like Andre Fili. He knocked out the Korean Superboy. His last fight, I know the guy was a bantamweight, but he still made the adjustments and won the fight in the third round. He has a lot of upside. I like him.
I think, is he not training at TriStar? I just assumed he was because he's from Quebec. So maybe he is kind of training. But saying that, like the regulations, the COVID regulations, like no one's actually.
Rory McDonald's in Florida right now because of that, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Then you might be right. Because I know like Andrew Sanchez, he was like, yeah, I kind of have to keep it a secret where I'm training and stuff because it's crazy. But yeah, you're right. Rory is in Florida. So maybe you should join suit. Marc-Andre Barrio, I know, was training in Sanford as well. So maybe Jourdain can go over there and train with some of the good fighters on that. Big Zomega, we'll get to this question as well. He says, speaking of Yusuf, what is your favorite Dana White Contender Series fight of all time? Ooh, good question. John, I'll let you answer that first. There's so many good ones.
There's so many fights that I can't remember any of
them. I know. We're having to go through the memory bank here. I'm just trying to think of like a good like all-out war like background. Okay, I'll tell you one that was awesome. I don't know if you want to put it as your top one, but that Brendan Loughnane and Bill Algeo fight was amazing. Bill Algeo in the UFC now. Brendan Loughnane should have been in the UFC's in PFL now, but that's one that comes to mind. Those two really threw the kitchen sink at each other.
I don't even remember. I don't even remember that fight. I know both of those guys who they are, but I don't remember that fight. One fight that comes to mind is I think it was Sadiq Youssef versus Mike Davis. Was that in Dana White's Contender Series?
I believe it was. Yeah.
Wasn't that a crazy fight too?
It was. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. Good call. I forgot about that.
Both those guys are in the UFC right now, right?
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
They deserved it. They deserve, the UFC call up. But and another one I think was a crazy fight was Alon Cruz versus.
The guy that why do I forget the guy's name? Because I remember interviewing Alon before that fight. He ended up losing, I think,
and he got that late flying knee.
Oh no, sorry, no, he won that. It was Stephen Wynn.
Stephen Wynn and versus Alon Cruz.
I think it's Nguyen. I can't remember. But yeah, he beat him on Contender Series, that flying knee. I actually spoke to Stephen Nguyen recently because he won on LFA. He's out of Fortis. He's a good.
He'll be in the UFC soon.
Easily. And so many of those guys. It's just like they're just waiting to get that shot. You know, who's another guy to keep an eye on at Fortis is Elijah Johns, Miles Johns' brother. He's really good. He's going to be in the UFC soon, I think, as well. So speaking of Fortis, let's get to Ben Gordon again, not the basketball player. That's a bad dad joke I keep bringing up, but he says, "Does Kevin Holland beat Marvin Vettori?" So I saw the odds came out for that fight. I haven't seen it confirmed yet. I know Vettori, I think, said he was game, but that's not the same as it actually being booked. So, I mean, if the fight happens, which, by the way, I made a mistake yesterday when I was doing my video. I, for some reason, thought that Holland wasn't ranked. He was. So I guess I could see Holland taking it. Personally, if Brunson's ready to go, he should get the fight because he beat Holland. Can Holland beat Vettori? Maybe. I mean, I do think there's something to this opponent switch up at the last minute for the guy who had the original scheduled fight, because Holland's got nothing to lose now. He can go down to welterweight. It doesn't matter. He's already said he's going to do that. He really has nothing to lose here, but I have to take Vettori. To answer your question, can Holland win? Of course he can win. Anything can happen when there's a late switch up. Look at Marvin Vettori, what he did to Jack Hermanson when Hermanson had two opponent switch ups. Vettori was able to take advantage. Who's to say Holland can't do the same thing here? But, and you know what else? If that fight does end up happening, and this is something I'm sure people will talk about, Holland talks a lot of trash. Marvin Vettori, a bit of a loose cannon. Remember that whole thing with Carl Roberson in the hotel, and he's Italian. They're passionate, right? I mean, the passion is kind of what I'm getting at. Not to create a Reddit thread where people are going to say I'm thinking that Marvin Vettori is a head case or anything, but that could play a role. Maybe Holland gets under his skin. You never know. So what do you think? Can Holland beat Marvin Vettori in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so.
That's
I think
John
Marvin
Dinosaur.
Vettori, I don't think so. Marvin Vettori is a monster right now, man. And I saw a clip like before we got on the show. I saw a clip on Twitter of Marvin Vettori explaining like what happened, like the day he found out, or yesterday he found out about the fight. I guess Brunson, he didn't take the fight because something's wrong with his foot. So they were talking about trying to get Brunson. They both have the same manager, I believe.
They do, yeah.
And then Vettori said that he's agreed to fight Holland if Holland's down, and they're just waiting on that. And I guess he's gonna fight Holland if Holland is not just selling wolf tickets online. You know what I mean? Because you can't believe everything you see on Twitter, right? You can't believe like, oh yeah, I signed.
And like, no offense to this guy, it's like Colby saying he was going to step up and fight Tyron that one time when I think he was missing an opponent. Like, we knew that wasn't going to happen. There's money involved, right? Like, and it's nothing against Colby. He's smart. He's putting his name out there to make headlines, right? So
it's all part of the game, you know what I mean? But we can't believe everything that's there, you know what I mean, that's written online. You gotta wait until it's announced, you know what I mean, or somebody has some information on it, some sources or something like that. But yeah, I think that they should put the fight together if Kevin Holland is down, because who else is going to step up at this moment and fight?
I was looking at the rankings. I mean, you could potentially split up Weidman and Hall, but that fight's already been rebooked. I think they should probably keep it intact. What was the other one? I think it was Akhmedov I was looking at. I think he's got a fight book. Maybe you could slide him. He has the same manager as Vettori as well. What was the other name? Yeah, it was Brunson, but I guess if Brunson's out, he can't take it. Yeah, you're right. The options are kind of limited. So yeah, I was a little hard on Kevin because I was like, why would they do this? Like, he just got dominated his last fight. I could see if it was a close fight against Brunson and he gets the shot, that's fine. But he decisively lost his last fight. Like, wasn't even close. And now he's going to get a main event reward out of that. I mean, I don't like that. But yeah, anyways. Let's keep the questions going here. Again, we got about 10 minutes left here on the chat. We want to thank all of you for tuning in. Another reminder, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and get the Fanatics app. Literally, getfanatics.app is how you can get the app. Download it. It's a great app, especially if you guys are looking up stats and everything. They do a fantastic job, and we're super happy to be a part of this team and doing this podcast every week. Let's get to the boss man again. He says, will you be watching one on TNT? This is a good card and one I would typically tune into. It's just, if I'm not mistaken, that's on Friday, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
That's my wife's birthday. And it's the long weekend here in Canada because of Easter. So I'll do my best, but probably not going to happen. It's my wife. I mean, you're married, John. You can't miss this stuff. I gotta pamper my wife that day. So if anything, I'll probably catch the replay, but I won't. I don't think I'll watch it live. But by the way,
I think there's 4 of them though. 4.
Oh, is there?
One on TNT. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's going to be one every weekend for the month.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant just the one this week, this Friday. Yeah, I'll probably be tuning into the other ones if I can, because I think they're on at like a better hour. Misha was saying that yesterday when we spoke to her. Which, by the way, Misha Tate, if you guys didn't know, handed in her 30 days to one championship. She's no longer going to be with them with the UFC thing, because I know some people were wondering, could she do both? Obviously, you can't if you're training for a fight. So it's one thing to keep in mind as well. What else we got here? James also says, what do you think about Paddy the Baddy? What do you think Paddy the Baddy can achieve in the UFC? He's still pretty young. I've been hearing about this guy fighting in the UFC since like 2015. Let me just look at the stats here. I mean, good for him. He's a guy that I know the UFC's been very high on in a while. He's 12-2-1. Sorry, not Paddy Houlihan. Paddy Pimblett is who I'm thinking of.
And I think he turned out the initial offer for the UFC.
Did he?
Yeah.
He's 16-3.
A few years back,
I typed in Paddy Houlihan. I haven't heard that name in a while. Yeah, he's coming off back-to-back wins. He lost to Soren back in 2018. That was the fight I think it was supposed to get him in the UFC. How old is he? 26. I think he'll do interesting. I mean, he's a pretty big guy for well, I shouldn't say for lightweight. I guess he's 5'10". He's got a decent reach. He's 26. Yeah, it'll be interesting. He's a chip they can use for like the European cards. He's got a huge following. I've been hearing about this guy, like I said, for probably 5 years. So what can he achieve? We'll see. When it's one thing to make the UFC, it's another thing to be successful in there. Who's the guy that fought Chimaev that's had a rough go? I think he actually got released. Yeah. No, it was let me find his name. I know someone in the chat's like, it's this guy, and I just can't remember off the top of my head.
I know you're talking about.
I interviewed him. I should remember the guy's name. It was he was the lightweight fighter, and then he had to move up and fight Chimaev at welterweight. Reese McKee, that's what I was thinking of. So like you never know, right? You can go to the UFC and take a couple fights, and then you can be out of there in like 2 seconds. So hopefully that's not the case. I think Pimblett will have a little bit more upside there as well, but we'll see. We'll see. It's a much different ball game when you're competing with the best in the world in the UFC. So I will say that.
Yeah, Patty, like you said, there's a lot of hype around him, and I'm gonna say that there is, and I'm not too educated on him and his like record, but I'm interested to see what he can do. Whenever somebody comes out of Cage Warriors and they were a champion, I'm always interested.
By the way, Mike saving the day once again here. I'm off my game this morning. I don't know what's going on. The one card is next weekend, not this weekend. My bad on that. So I probably can, check that out next Friday. And it's Bellator that's this weekend as well, which reminds me, before we wrap things up, we didn't even get to our Bellator underdog pick of the week. Normally do it for the UFC, but since we got this card on Saturday coming up here, let me just have a look at some of the odds and where we could potentially see an upset here. Let me have a quick look. You get the Fanatics app out as well if you guys want to do that and check out some of the fights here. Okay, so if there could be, I'll tell you an underdog that I think potentially could pull something off here. I mean, actually, I'm going to go with the safe bet here. If I'm going to go with the safe bet here, as far as an upset, I'm going to take Emmanuel Sanchez over Pitbull. Sanchez, tough to finish. Their first fight was very close. I love Pitbull. I think he is one of the most underrated fighters in MMA. I mean, you don't just knock out Michael Chandler for nothing. You don't, go 21-4, whatever his record is. All of his losses, I think, are decisions. I think Sanchez could be the one guy to upset Pitbull just because he's so durable. And look at how much better he's gotten. That Daniel Weichel fight in his last fight? He dominated Weichel. Wasn't even close. That makes me think that this fight could be even more different. So that's a safe pick. I'll tell you the one I was thinking of, though, John, and I'll get your pick in a second here. It was actually Roger Huerta. I know Huerta's 37. I know he's nowhere near what he used to be, but you look at who he's losing to: Sidney Outlaw, Benson Henderson. Those are good fighters. Chris Gonzalez has got 5 fights. That could be a spot too where Huerta could pull off an upset as well. I might even throw a little bit on him at plus 210, but at 37, you know what they're doing here. They're trying to build up Chris Gonzalez in that fight. Gonzalez, 5-0. So those are 2 spots, but I think the pick officially I'll go with is Emmanuel Sanchez, but I am picking Pitbull in the fight. But if you want my underdog pick, it's going to be Sanchez. Your thoughts?
Yeah, with Roger Huerta, I can see what you're saying, but the thing is, like, he's a wild card. Like, you don't even know where he's training. Even
look how many fights he's got: 24, 12, and 1 against a guy who's got 5 fights. That is kind of glaring there, but I'm with you. Gonzalez probably wins, but still.
Yeah. If you're gonna put some money down on an underdog, Huerta is a proven product, so maybe you could. But what the underdog that I'm taking on the Bellator card, and a lot of these odds are so close that they're not really underdogs. But since she is a plus 150, I'm
gonna someone in the chat mentioning that too. Yeah, Watanabe, or however you say her name.
Watanabe, Kana Watanabe, she's undefeated. She's, she has a strong grappling background, a good striker. 2019, at the end of 2000, when they had the Bellator Japan card, she took on Lara Joanne. Yeah, and she beat her, finished her. And I think Lara Joanne had a lot of hype behind her for a little bit, in Bellator with the camp that she came out of. And she went in there and completely dominated her. I could see her doing the same thing. I feel like this underdog will, if I was going to bet, I think this would be the one.
There you go. Again, I want to remind people to download the Fanatics app. We always got to mention that. You look how clean and nice it looks on there. I mean, it's so easy to read. So shout out to the Fanatics app as well. Radical Ross, your comments are appearing, but we already answered that. Maybe we didn't answer that question. Do you guys want to see the O'Malley rematch and Chito get the fluke off his record? We already talked about that. We don't think that O'Malley's got, at this point, he can set his sights higher than Chito Vera. Chito Vera win does nothing for him at this point. I don't think people care. He's already going around saying he's undefeated, so I think he's sort of past the Vera fight, which we sort of talked about as well.
We don't like that F word in this chat. Come on, guy.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think it was a fluke.
Yeah, it wasn't a fluke. I thought you were going to say the other F word, but that's fine. Big Zamega says he dropped the news of signing to the UFC with Halwani a few years back in an interview, and then the deal fell through after that. Oh, that's true. When was that, though? Because I remember there was a fight he was supposed to win and he lost. I think it was the Soren back fight. Might even been another one. We're talking about Paddy Pimblett, by the way. When he was going to get signed to the UFC.
I think you're right. I think he went and he announced that he was going to get the deal, and then he went and lost to Soren Bach, and Soren Bach actually went to Bellator, and then now, delayed, I guess, signing for the UFC. But yeah, anyways, he's there. I mean, that's all that matters. And now we're going to get to see him. Like, who do he match up with? That's the question. We got a couple minutes. What do you think?
You give him kid gloves, you give him a vet, you give him like a Darren Elkins or something like that, I would think, right?
That's a good fight. I like that. That's a good fight.
Or no, Nate the Train. Do Nate the Train. He's on a skid right now. He's in his 30s. I hate to say it, Nate the Train. The Train's been at the station the last couple fights, right? So he desperately needs to win. And Nate actually beat Darren Elkins. So I think Darren Elkins or Nate Lamb would be my chat as well. By the way, got to give another shout out to Big Zamega, who says the Fanatics app layout is very clean and organized. I loved it personally. There you go. We don't even have to say anything. We get the customers, we get the people talking about how good this app is. So just keep that in mind. Again, we love the app and we love working for these guys. They're honestly, I can honestly say this, like this isn't even like an advertisement or anything like that. I've worked for a lot of companies in this industry. So far, so good. Probably one of the best. We've talked about this off air, right, John? We don't need to go into detail, but these guys are awesome. Shout out to Mike and James and the rest of the team over there. We're so happy that they brought us on and we're doing this show because John and I have been wanting to do something for a while, and it's been really cool. Okay, we got about a minute left. Good time to plug anything you got going on this week, JHK. I know you're always busy. You're always keeping tabs. You got the live chat with, I think it's Tom Taylor and Ant Walker, right? I think is coming up here.
That's later tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern. I'll have that, my show, and on SCMP MMA. And I got a bunch of interviews that I did this past week. I interviewed Hamzaoui, probably the greatest atomweight fighter of all time. And a bunch of one championship fighters, a couple of UFC fighters. And I got a couple of interviews coming up soon in the next couple of days that probably be interesting for you guys. I don't want to drop no names because that could jinx me.
It happens. It jinxes it. I already did it today. Maybe something's going to happen in my interview, but we'll see. I always expect one of my interviews is going to fall out.
And just make sure to follow me on at JHK MMA on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And and download the app, man, and join me as I make my picks.
I gotta make my picks, man. I've been slacking. I gotta get on there and do it. You'll see the James, and then you guys can make fun of me.
Jeremy Brand is number one. Jeremy Brand is
we can't let that happen. I need to own the Vancouver region of MMA picks. So I need to take out Jeremy, and Jeremy's got to go golfing with me. I keep telling him that, but we'll figure that out here soon. Like I said, we're already at the top of the hour, but I got a bunch of stuff I got to plug here quickly. First off, I started a new podcast. Yes, I'm doing like 6 podcasts, but whatever. I got a lot of bandwidth to do things. Kendrick Johnson and I started the new show, The 1-2 Kick. The 1-2 with James and Kendrick. Already butchered it. Not a good start there. But we talked to Rashad Evans and really great interview with him talking about the whole John Jones situation, about UFC 260. Check that out. You'll find that on my UFC interviews playlist. Also talked to Misha Tate yesterday on my other podcast, Victory Loves Company. Misha talking about coming out of retirement, the whole, who she can be trained with. Actually interesting. She mentioned who one of her coaches is going to be at Extreme Couture that's coming in, which will be kind of interesting as well. So there's that. I talked to Alexander Rakic this morning. That's actually why I've had a crazy day already. I've been up since 4 a.m. my time because I was supposed to interview Rakic. We had an issue with the time. We managed to figure it out. We got it done. So check that out. That'll be for Fanatics View. Check that out as well. I'll have that on my UFC interviews playlist. And then, I got a bunch of other interviews coming up this week and my Q&A tomorrow on my channel, youtube.com/LynchOnSports. If you guys missed any questions today, you can get me on the Q&A tomorrow on my channel. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports. And last time, I know I got to say it, but it's housekeeping. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button on this video. We do the show every single Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, 8 a.m. Pacific time, whatever time you're in. Use Time Zone Converter. It's a great website. It'll tell you what time the show's on. Make sure you tune in. Leave us a like. Leave us a comment as well. We like to hear feedback. If there's a fight you want us to preview in the coming weeks, we can certainly do that. But I think next week we'll stick with Diaz and Edwards unless something changes. I'm James Lynch. He is John Coe. Thanks so much for watching. Shout out to Mike once again for doing a kick-ass job behind the scenes, and the boss man, James. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you guys next week, and have a great rest of your day, night, evening, wherever you are. Thanks so much for watching.